What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Chris, man. We are back again with the Work Hard, Play Harder podcast. We are back with another episode. We got my lovely guest that's going to be coming on soon. Her name is Jane McManus. She is a former sports reporter, columnist for ESPN for almost 10 years, covered all kinds of events from NFL to tennis, over 18 U.S. Open that she did, and five Super Bowls. Had a radio show with Kate Fagan and Sarah Spain called The Trifecta at one point at her time at ESPN. She's covered everything from high school to professional sports. She's now a sports columnist for the New York Daily News, and currently she is the director. She is the director. She is the director of the Center for Sports Communications, and she is a lecturer at Marist University. So we're gonna get into it, baby. We're gonna talk about a lot, and we're gonna have her on. It's gonna be a good time, no doubt about it. So I'm looking forward to talking to her. And without any further ado, I'm gonna bring her on. Here she comes. Jane, how we doing today?
Hey, good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Just want to say good morning and thank you. Welcome to the Work Hard, Play Harder podcast, Conversations with CD. I do
Nice.
appreciate it. I do appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. I just have to, I have to know what level of appearance is required at all times. As
I know.
a
I get it. I get it. And listen, you look fabulous. It's
thank
great.
you. Thanks. That's the important part.
Yes, you look great. You look awesome. Without any further ado, I'm gonna hop right into it.
Okay.
What I want you to do is, I want you. You're a Virginia native. You're from Virginia, but you grew up in Nebraska. Um,
Yes.
so I would love to hear about your childhood and how did you come to like sports, and if you did anything as far as either play or maybe do media as you were growing up in high school when you went to Lincoln High School, if I'm not mistaken. Did you do anything as far as play or media or both as you graduated Lincoln High School?
Well, I'll start off by saying that I was born the year before Title IX, so
Okay.
1971. So back then, girls, it's not like it is today. Girls were not, driven to basketball practice every day. I was raised by a single mom as well. My parents divorced when I was 2.
Okay.
So I, didn't get there wasn't a lot of like I was not the priority. My sports were not the priority growing up. I was an only child. So I did a lot of like playing baseball in the neighborhood, playing football in the neighborhood, running out in the woods, that kind of thing
Okay.
in Virginia. And, I remember that my first stitches were, I was in a was playing in a football game and I tackled somebody's dad. And I thought like that was something I could do. I was pretty
Right.
convinced at age 9 that I could pull him down.
Okay.
So, I ended up going to the emergency room on a big wheel. Like that was kind of my childhood.
Wow.
So I didn't play anything formal, but I played a lot of, like basketball. I made the basketball team in 7th grade, but I didn't get the physical done in time. Again, just like some disorganization. And
Right.
so I ended up playing a lot of basketball and I was super interested in journalism. I did write for the school newspaper. I was the editor of the school newspaper in junior high. By that time I was in Lincoln,
Okay.
the Mickle Missile, Robin Mickle Junior High School, if anybody else is out there. And yeah, and I wrote for the school paper my senior year, and well, my sophomore, junior, senior year in at Lincoln High. So yeah, I did do a little bit of all of that. But, when I went to college, St. John's College in Annapolis, Maryland, which is a small liberal arts school,
Right.
I started playing. And as I said, I'd always been super active. I was on one team at Lincoln High, and that was the synchronized swimming team. They had a synchronized swimming team at Lincoln High my senior year. I had the
Okay.
solo. I was very, like I said, I did a lot of like, I was super active. I skied, I water skied. I like I said, ran around. I went to a summer camp in the summers where I got exposure to a lot of different sports that I didn't necessarily in the neighborhood.
Right.
Um, So, but when I got to St. John's College, I started playing pickup basketball. I played on the intramural team for the women's intramural team there. We fielded an intercollegiate team 1 year. I played on that, but mostly I was just playing pickup. Like we played at least 3 times a week for like 2 hours a pop, and I was always out there playing pickup. I became pretty obsessed with basketball.
Okay. No, I like that. I like how you did some things in high school, but you also picked up some sports in college, and that's where your love grew in sports. And ultimately now, which we will get into later, is now you're the director, and you're also a professional lecturer at Marist University. So, um, and we will definitely touch upon that a little bit later for sure. Um, was there any other choices outside? Because you mentioned St. John's and Annapolis. Maryland is where you went to get your bachelor's and later you will get your master's at Columbia University. But as far as the bachelor's go to undergrad, was there any other choices outside of St. John's College?
That's an interesting question. Okay, so I have two daughters. They're 18 and 16. My older one is a freshman.
Okay.
And my younger one is going to be a senior in high school next year. So I feel like I've seen this question now from a number of different angles. And I kind of feel like if the decision to go to college, the choice to go to college, and there are lots of other choices out there, it's not the only choice for sure. But I don't know that everybody, I think everybody has a kind of a wistful feeling, right, about it. Like, oh, I wish I could have gone, if I just done X or gotten this score on something, or, my grades were a little bit higher, I could have done this other thing, or I almost got in, or I was waitlisted here or whatever. And so I feel like the college decision is always fraught. Well, so I was, and mine was too. And I'll tell you that I was a Virginia girl in Nebraska. I felt like anyway, when I was 18, I now feel like I've been in New York so long, it's hard to remember what all this was like, but, but at that time I felt like, all the schools that I applied to were on the East Coast from Nebraska. I wanted to get back to the East Coast because I felt like, I felt a bit marooned in Nebraska, although now I look back on it and I love Nebraska, and, and I loved that part of my childhood and the upbringing that I had there. So I can't say that I feel like that now, but at that time I was definitely itching to get back to the East Coast, and I wanted nothing more than to move back to Virginia. And so I applied to James Madison University, where my mom had gotten her MBA and my grandmother had taught, like back in the 30s. He taught there. Okay. And I had, and I felt like I had all of these connections and stuff, and I didn't get in. I did not get into James Madison University. I got into NYU. I got into St. John's, all these other different schools.
You got into NYU, but not James Madison? What?
I know. I feel like getting into school is such a crapshoot. It's like, you don't know why you're going to get in one place and why you're not going to get in another. Like, I guess James Madison looked at my synchronized swimming team experience and wasn't so interested in that. I mean, I can't explain what it was or why I didn't get in, but I was crushed. Like, I'd lived in Harrisonburg for 2 years in Virginia, and I wanted nothing more than to move back there. And, who knows what my life would have been like if I'd gotten in, though. Maybe I'd be like, I'd have like 10 kids and I'd be living in Woodstock, Virginia, and, and I'd have a, a store or a B&B or something like that. Who knows?
Right.
It's just hard to know what your future would have been like but it would not, it would have been a different, I had a different life if I'd gotten into JMU. So I kind of look back on it now and I think, I don't know. I mean, but it's funny. I'm sure a lot of people have stories like that. And for anybody who's actually in school now and looking to apply, like, you just don't know what is going to spark the interest of one person over another. I say, like, you should always like aim high, have a couple schools in there that and then you've got to wait for that. This was, what I noticed with my daughters is like, they got into a lot of great schools and they got very different financial packages from those schools. And that made a huge difference. Is like, how can you afford school? I mean, because if you have to pay full freight to go to your dream school, I mean, that might not be something that you can do. And, so a lot of times you have to it's not so much like the school kind of chooses you in a way.
Right.
Yeah. So I feel like, especially now, working for Marist, I realize I feel like I see this issue from a whole different point of view. Whereas before it was just like, I felt stung that I didn't get into a school that I wanted to get into. And now I just see like that it's a very layered picture, and just how complicated those decisions really are.
You know, this is a question just came up in my mind, Jane, while you was talking about that, because you're absolutely right. Schools, you know, things kind of choose you for different circumstances, whether it's financial, staying at home, or I really just want to get the hell away from my parents and just go and travel and get on the other side. Talk about sell merit. If there was an up and coming student that wants to, you know, that's kind of deciding where to go and kind of on the fence, why is Marist a good selection for a college student to go
Well, this is not going to be a hard question for me to answer. I think that there are a couple of different things that I love about Marist. So St. John's, where I went, is a core liberal arts curriculum. Everyone takes the same classes. You get a Bachelor of Arts in the liberal arts at the end of it. It's basically a philosophy degree.
to?
You learn Greek, you learn, French, you read, the Iliad in the original Greek. So there are lots of things about it that are just so general in a way. You're not specified in any way. But what I love about it is that it does give you this window into what the larger college experience is, and it gives you a taste of all these different things. And Marist does that as well, because they have these 10 you have to take 10 core classes in different areas, whether it's English or fine arts, et cetera. And it kind of gives you a window on that entire academic experience, right? You might take a class in something you had no idea about, and just serendipity, you are sent down a different pathway. And I really like that for college experience, because I think sometimes if you come in and you're really fixated on what you want to do, you kind of limit your scope. And so I think Marist kind of forces you to open your view up a bit and see everything that's out there. So that's one of the reasons I love it. And then I think our program, the Center for Sports Communication, is fantastic. We are so close to the city that all of our students in the sports comm program end up going to the city generally, if not someplace else, to do an internship. Wow. So that's a great experience. And there are lots of, I just got a call this week from, a major league that was looking for somebody to apply for internships. And so our students have to win those internships, right? You apply for them like jobs, you're not given anything, but at the same time, you get that possible experience. And then I think, we have a program that involves, an ESPN3 that videos all of our broadcast streams, all of our games, a lot of our D1 games. So you have that experience of kind of covering a D1 team when it comes to being part of that broadcast and that production. And then also we have something called Center Field, which is like our online sports section. And so you can come in, and because we're a smaller program, we have like 150 students, and it self-selects then into those that are interested in kind of that center field experience. You could come in as a freshman and cover a soccer team. There's really are lots of opportunities for you to exist in a collaborative environment. That paper, that sports section, Center Field, it's completely independent. It's student run. So you come in, you're pitching your own stories, you're edited by your peers. I think there are a lot of really good things about that. And then we also have some research opportunities, in our core curriculum at the center is really strong as well. And I think, we try to put together, speakers and, programming that is really going to kind of give you a sense of what, where in sports you belong. Because I feel like there are a lot of people who come into sports and they think, I want to be on TV. I want to be I want to be Stephen A. I mean, there are a lot of people who kind of see that as as what their wheelhouse is. And I think that's because they want to work in sports, but they don't necessarily know what the different roles are.
Right.
And
a lot of different roles.
Lots of places. Yeah. Right. There are lots of places you can fit in, right? It doesn't have to be one thing or another. And you don't just have to be, you don't necessarily want your career to be exactly what Adam Schefter did. We had Adam Schefter in this year to speak to our students, and and you don't want to duplicate what he's done, because he did it. You want to do your own thing. You want to figure out, what is it that I want to do? How can I best contribute? Because Adam Schefter checks his phone every night at 2 a.m. and I don't want to live that life. So, you know what I mean? Like, you have to find something that's right for you. And, so I think a lot of our students come in and they don't really know what the options are necessarily. And so by the time they reach their senior year, I think they have a better sense of what they like, what their affinities are, what they're good at. And then they also have it in the context of the broader world as well. And to me, knowing sports and being a sports writer or being in sports is one thing, but I think you have to have I think you need other things in your life. What else makes you interesting? How are you going to connect with people? It's not just going to be on box scores. You are going to have to, you're going to have to be a more well-rounded person in order to be happy in this life. And, and I like to think that at Marist, we're kind of starting you on that path.
I like that. I really like that answer, Jane. And I mean, you said a lot of enticing things for somebody to come there. I mean, obviously, New York City, to being the #1 market in the game as far as sports journalism goes, or one of the top markets, obviously, the city can't get no better than that with all the teams.
It's the greatest city in the world. You can just say that, Chris.
I could, but I've never been to it. I've heard it's the greatest city in the world, but I've never actually been to the city of New York. I've been to New York, but only upstate. But with all those possibilities there, that's just crazy. You got all kind of professional teams, college teams, like you said. To be able to come in as a freshman, though, that is probably one of the most enticing things that you said. To come in as a freshman, get clips published, because typically a lot of schools at freshman time, you got to start at the lower bottom of a lot of stuff. So to get that, that's pretty cool. I want to ask you some favorite things. Okay, so you just tell me what they are. I'm gonna ask you right off the bat. Okay.
Yeah.
Favorite food?
Nachos. Oh, and crab dip. My Maryland side.
That definitely is a Maryland thing, without question. Favorite music?
Rap. Old school. Oh. Public Enemy.
Really? Okay.
Nation of Millions.
I like that.
Yeah. I know a lot of people don't. a lot of it, I like a Nation of Millions changed my life. Like, you don't know. Yeah. So a lot of people, I know doesn't fit my type. A lot of people are surprised by that, but
yeah, I'm definitely surprised, but I love it. I absolutely love it. Favorite movie genre?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I have two favorite movies, Goodfellas and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. They're very different, but
they are.
Like that epic kind of storytelling. I like that kind of epic storytelling.
Goodfellas is the classic.
It is.
Anything with De Niro and Pesci is always a classic. Without question.
Very good. Yeah, I recently, because in the pandemic you have a lot of time on your hands for some media viewing, and I in the last year rewatched The Godfather as well, like another, just like fantastic. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Favorite place to travel?
Well, so I lived in the UK for 2 years, starting in 2017, and did a lot of traveling. And so that's a really tough one for me to answer. London, it's a great city.
We'll go with that. Favorite alcoholic drink?
I don't drink. So nothing. Yeah, a mocktail.
Got you. Totally. Favorite restaurant?
There's like a chain restaurant, or there's like a little Greek place.
Any restaurant you like to
go to? All right, I went to this great place last night called MP Taverna in Irvington, New York, and it's on the Hudson River, and it serves fresh Greek food, and it's delicious.
Wow, I like that. Okay, 2 more.
Okay.
Favorite sport to cover?
Tennis, probably the U.S. Open. I love covering the U.S. Open.
That's a damn good sport to cover. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Love
the storytelling is great. Like, you have the individual side, but then you also have some team aspect. But if you want to cover a little doubles, little mixed doubles. But I think I just find there's so many different people from so many different perspectives, and I think you also get, with the Williams sisters and the last 20 years, I think that the tennis press and the tennis audience has really been sensitized to a lot of issues when it comes to race, and also to women, with Title IX and Billie Jean King starting her own tour, with the nine who broke away and then in 1973. And I just think, so in a lot of ways, I think it's, it's a sport that's very good for women. And I think it's also a sport that's come around to see how that diversity is a strength. If you look at especially the women coming up in the American.
No question about it. Sloane Stephens, Coco Gauff, Naomi Osaka, just to name a few.
She technically plays for Japan, but she did grow up in New York, and and she has her foot in a number of different cultures. Yeah. With her grandparents are Caribbean, and her mother's Japanese, and then also the American side. So I think she has, like, in some way, like, it's fascinating. She has this kind of all of these different components to her personality and to her worldview. I find the people who play tennis to be very interesting, and you get to see them, I think, in a really unique way.
That's awesome. Last one, favorite sport to play?
Roller derby. I played roller derby for 7 years.
We're going to get into that. We are going to get into that, because I know it. I know you did, and I'm definitely going to ask about it. But the next question
you did your homework, I have to say, Chris. Very good.
Thank you. Good. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. What is something that you would tell an up-and-coming person that wants to be in this industry that is a minority? And what I mean by that is that you and I are considered to be minorities. And what I mean by that is there's not a lot of women in the sports media industry field. There needs to be a lot more. That can't be overstated enough. But it also needs a lot more African Americans in this industry as well, and minority people as well. What would you tell somebody on how to deal with being in this industry as a minority?
Well, I think you have to, the mantra is true. You have to work twice as hard. Is that fair? No, it's not fair. Can you change it? No, you can't change it. And so I think it's, part of learning how to be successful in this industry is realizing that there are going to be structural impediments in your way. Things that, you can get mad at, and you can be, and can hold you back. They can definitely hold you back. Is that going to do you any good? No, you have to. I always feel like, I was talking to Julie DeCaro, who's my co-host on the Ladies Room podcast, about this. And I feel like you have to have a certain, blinders on in a certain way, where you have to be, it's like, worrying about the next play. You have to move on to the next play, because there's nothing you can do about certain structural issues, whether it's people who think you got your job because you're a woman, or you're, you're a Black person in the industry, I always tell Jamel Hill is one of my mentors in this business, without question. And, and people always, some people used to say, like, oh, well, so-and-so, I've heard this, like, so-and-so got their job because of their status, whatever that status is. Right. And I'd be like, well, if that's the case, like, why is Jamel Hill the only Black woman who's a sports columnist in the United States? Like, if people of color are getting all these jobs, like, why isn't every single columnist reflecting that? Because that's not true. And we still have to work really hard, I think. And I do think it gets better. I do think it's gotten, better. I think the awareness is there. I think, it used to be that sports editors were trying to diversify their staffs because they thought, oh, this is I want to be on the right side of the angels. And then, we had the economic imperatives of, the late 2010s, where staffs were getting cut. And I think diversity was the last thing on the list at that point. But now I think, and this is one of the silver linings from the awful summer that we went through last year, when it came to just understanding how deep the injustice goes in this country. Yep. But I think that now you have sports editors that understand, and network executives that understand that if you want to be able to tell the stories, you really do need to have people of different points of view and lived experiences on your staff. And that's almost become a cliche at this point. It's trite, but it's because it's so true. And I think that, you'll miss stuff. And I think a lot in the past, I think, at sports editors and networks have been okay with missing stuff. They're like, oh, we don't tell those stories. Fine. We're not interested in, we want to tell the stories we want to tell about the people we want to tell the stories about. But now I think they're understanding that, it's kind of driven by the athletes. They're like, no, we want you to tell our stories too. And the stories about where we've been from, the things we've experienced, the impediments we face culturally. And so I think, the storytelling that's done now has to be a bit more layered and nuanced, and with that understanding. You have to meet athletes now where they are insisting you come.
Absolutely.
And I think those demands are relevant, and I think they're good. And I think it's forcing the industry to evolve.
Absolutely. I use the analogy a lot. It's hard to be a chef if you don't know how to cook. You got to be in them shoes. You got to be in them shoes to be able to relate to the athletes and storytell. It's
Well,
hard for people. Go ahead.
And I was raised, like I said, raised by a single mom, so like a lot. So sometimes I could relate. I could talk to athletes about that. And now I understand that, my upbringing I still benefited from the privilege that came from being a white person in the South, as opposed to being a person of color in the South.
Right.
So,
right.
And at first I thought, oh, well, my childhood was just the same as theirs because, but then, like, again, my thinking has evolved too, where I felt like I was relating, and where I can relate on some things, I now see that there are wide differences as well in
Right.
terms of what I had access to. And what the ideas of generational wealth and what that means. And I grew up, I was on free lunch as well when I grew up.
Right.
But at the same time, I did have access to a larger family where there was money. Like if I needed something, right. if there had been a medical expense, I would have had it paid for. Whereas I don't think that necessarily would have been the case with a lot of people that I've covered over the years as well. And so, I had to check myself too, in terms of what I thought when I got into the business about, what similarities were and what were differences. And, that's been I think that's a growing process for everybody.
Without question, no doubt. Now you've covered up to a lot of tennis events. I mean, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 18 U.S. Opens.
Something like that. I think more than that now, but yeah, something like that.
But at least 18.
Yeah, 99 was my first.
99 was your first. Okay, so I'm sure, obviously, with the 4 majors, did you get to cover all 4 of the majors? No?
I've never covered the Australian, and I've never covered the French.
Okay, but you did cover Wimbledon.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would like for you to name your top 5 tennis players of all time, male or female, does not matter. In your mind, who do you think is the top 5?
I have to say, I don't necessarily think like that. I don't have, I don't have a list in my head. I tend, I feel like that's definitely like a sports debate type question. And I'm not really all that, like, that's not really my strength, but I, like, in terms of the players that I've covered, well, Serena Williams.
Yeah, absolutely. Serena Williams. Yeah. Oh yeah.
That others did, but I was there for Marat Safin's US Open win, and that year he was fantastic.
Okay.
Sampras and Nadal and Djokovic, obviously.
Okay.
Serena, I think Venus on the grass,
yeah,
is still is one of those players. I loved covering Amelie Mauresmo, because I thought she had such a beautiful looping backhand. Mm-hmm. And that I thought she was a real player. And she never, she didn't get to be in that top strata, but she was fantastic to cover. Okay. So those are some of my personal highlights, of people that I've covered, and Andre Agassi covering Pete's final Grand Slam. Those are all highlights for sure. I covered a match. Gosh, I want to say, I think it was 2000. It was in the early 2000s, maybe even 2001. It was Sampras and Agassi. They played in a quarterfinal at the U.S. Open. Neither of them broke serve. It went to tiebreakers. Played, I believe it was 4 sets without a break of serve.
That's a rivalry.
It was one of the most incredible matches I've ever been witness to. So yeah, so there have been a lot of things like that I've covered that have been real highlights.
That's probably my favorite rivalry, Sampras and Agassi. I was an Agassi guy. I loved Agassi and the way he played, although Sampras pretty much got the better of him in most of their matches. But that was just a clear-cut rivalry. They definitely beat each other pretty good.
I can absolutely, you want a stat that somebody reminded me of yesterday that absolutely blows my mind. Pete Sampras was 31 when he retired.
Wow.
Young. I don't think we kind of get a sense of how longevity has absolutely been revolutionized in the last 20 years when it
Yeah.
comes to a lot of, well, you look at Tom Brady playing still, but tennis players in particular, it's an individual sport. So you can't be the old veteran on a team. You have to be able to have the legs to go up against the 20-year-old across the net. And I just think it is, you look at Serena Williams, 39 now, still
Yeah.
competing, still reaching finals. In Grand Slam events, and it's incredible. It's incredible what has happened with the technology and the knowledge about player health in the last
Without question.
20 years. Unbelievable. That has actually been probably the biggest change of my career.
Yeah, definitely.
I have witnessed that revolution.
That's actually one of my bucket list things, to cover one of those top four, tennis as a sports reporter, sports, journalist, any of the sort. I would love to just cover tennis. Nadal's my guy now, but you got Djokovic, Federer out there. You got a couple other guys that's going to come up, but also the women's too. I would love to cover the women's as well, because I think, as you said, Serena's good. I like Sloane Stevens a lot. Coco Gauff is very young in the game. And then you just have some very talented ladies over there on that side too. So I would like to cover one of those four in my life. That's a bucket list item for me.
Well, I hope you get there.
Oh yeah, there's no question. I'm gonna continue working and grinding and doing that. So Leslie E. Viscerate, which is your alias name that you used as you played roller derby for 7 years. One, where the hell did you come up with that name? And then two, what made you want to play roller derby while still covering sports?
Yeah. Well, Leslie Visser is like my idol. She was one of the first women to cover sports. She worked at the Boston Globe, and then she did she worked for CBS as a reporter for many, many years, covered Super Bowls. She was, and this is where I became familiar with her, is that she was at the Final Four every year. I was a huge basketball fan. And player. And so that's what I loved. And I think the roller derby comes from that basketball player stuff, is that, when I played basketball, I played pickup. And when I moved to New York City, I kept playing pickup. I played in parks, and I played at the Y in Brooklyn. And I was always, generally the only woman on the court. I bought my own basketball. Well, my boyfriend and I bought a basketball because a leather NBA ball, so that I could have the nice ball whenever I walked onto a court, because that would mean that I would get to play. And
right.
So like, it wasn't a given. Like I would sometimes get a lot of static from a player who didn't necessarily want to play against a woman, particularly if you had to guard me. Like that was a real thing. Like sometimes they wouldn't guard me until I hit a couple shots. Like, didn't want to I played defense, and and I would go up for rebounds. And I think part of the roller derby thing is that the physicality that I needed to play the game if I was going to play and be taken seriously. I had to be physical. I couldn't shy away from that contact. And so I think I was super comfortable with it, and so I think roller derby, I ended up covering a bout in Connecticut. Gosh, I want to say 2006.
Okay.
And did a story on it. And, back then it was like fishnets and, women playing a tough sport kind of thing.
Right.
And so there was that kind of interplay. And I'm sure that I wrote that into my story. But then I said, I remember walking in to cover this thing, and it was a scrimmage between three different teams, kind of around robin. And I was like, oh my God, this is my next thing. Like this is, my daughters were like, I want to say 3 and 5. I hadn't played a lot of pickup basketball since having my second. And I just was ready for the next sport. I was ready for something physical. I was, I wanted to be active again. And so I remember walking in and thinking, this is it. So I told the organizers, look, if you ever start a team in Westchester, let me know. And about a year later, they called. That was it. So at the time, I was at the end of my time at the Journal News, and I was covering the Jets. And and so it was actually super helpful because, I know that in roller derby, everybody's going in the same direction. And in football, you're facing off. But there are a lot of similarities in the two sports when it comes to like creating space for yourself, um, and moving people out of the way, like, you know, hip checks, momentum, center of gravity. Like there are a lot of things that are similar. Creating space for other people, like to get through, like even though one's going one way and the other's this way, um, when a linebacker is creating a gap, or when or going through moving through to
Right.
moving through gaps to get to people, like there are lots of different things that are just enough that it helped me kind of visualize how things were working,
Wow.
and kind of translated one to the other.
You see, and this is the ultimate reason why you never judge a book by its cover. Because sitting here looking at you, it's like, man, you have this sweet face, wonderful smile, but deep down inside, you're gonna knock somebody's block off, and it's like, wow.
It's one of my joys in life. I mean, I don't get enough of it now, but I was known as a real bruiser. I know I broke well, I don't want to have to brag, but yeah, I like that. I love playing contact sports. I love covering contact sports. I love the physicality of that. And I think that's part of the reason that I've really, that I've lasted this long in this business, is that, look, I didn't understand. Well, I mean, I don't want to say understand. Like I looked at boxing one way before I actually covered a boxing match. And then I got it. I got why people like it so much, because it's like that vicarious pull that you feel, the adrenaline rush, all of it. You experience it as a witness to it. And, and I love playing contact. I love playing a full contact sport. So, yeah, I think there's, and I don't think that's unusual for women. I really don't. I mean, I just don't think you have the exposure to it. I remember when we would have tryouts at roller derby, like you would know pretty quickly. First you want to make sure people can skate well enough in order to be able to, and then when you run into somebody and you knock them down, you can see by the look on their face whether or not this is going to be something for them.
Right.
And I think that, like, but I think there are lots of, we often get typed by gender into what kind of sport we're going to be good at and like, when really I just think if you allowed people to have, I think it's ridiculous how much fighting there is in the NHL. And I also think it's ridiculous that there's no checking for women in hockey. Like, so, in college. So I just, I think these things there are a lot of questions you can ask about why sports are the way that they are, for one gender or for the other. And, so I don't mind playing against type.
No, that's great. I thought it was fascinating, obviously, when I read that you played for 7 years. I love the name Viscerate, because that just means it just means you're going to inflict pain. I mean, that's pretty much what that means. And it's awesome, though, to see that somebody can cover sports, write about it, cover different sports, and then also play roller derby on the side, also be a family person. The multitasking that you do just shows the strength in you, but it also shows your attention to detail and the fact that you just determined, you wanted to do all those things.
Well, I have to say, I think this is like, so I went into this, so I was also teaching I was adjuncting a journalism class at the same time. I mean, it's not all one night, it's over the course of, a week or 2 weeks, or whatever. Yeah. But I have to say, like, I remember somebody said, well, how can you possibly keep playing roller derby if you're going to be working at ESPN and covering the Jets? And I was like, well, I said, I'm just going to keep doing it until I can't, until there comes a night where I can't do it, or where I have to miss too many, matches or practices, or, I'm just going to keep doing it until somebody tells me no. And, and I that was my approach until it's too much for my family, or until it's this or it's that. And it just never got to be too much, so like it was, I was really lucky because I had a really good support network at home. Yep. But also, like, it just, my kids were going to bed by 7 o'clock. Mm-hmm. So after 7 o'clock was kind of my time, and that's when practices were. So I kind of was able to just kind of keep doing it. And each of them kind of fed different parts of me. So I think it's important for people to have interests outside of what their job is. Yeah. And, so anyway, that's kind of approach I've taken.
No, I'm glad you said that last part, because I was going to get to that part too. You just don't want to just focus on work all the time. It's good to have interests outside to kind of get away. from what you're doing, because work will always be there. It's always going to come. But to have interest on the outside and be able to find some love, some hobbies is great. I want to do this or that with you right now. So it's one or
Okay.
the other. I'm going to ask you and you just pick, okay?
Okay.
Tacos or burgers?
Tacos.
Thanksgiving or Christmas?
Thanksgiving.
London or New York?
I can't. Sorry. That's I can't do that one.
Come on, Jane. You got to pick one. You got to
I
pick
can't.
one, Jane. You got to. You got to
New
pick
York,
one.
New York,
London
New
or
York,
New York?
New York. But I love London.
I know you do. I know. It could be 51-49. It could
It's
be that.
1 and 1A. It's like
Oh,
yeah.
we could do that. We could do that. Drive-ins or theaters?
Drive-in,
Tennis or roller derby?
roller derby.
Brady or Montana?
Brady.
LeBron or MJ?
MJ.
He didn't seem so sure about that.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
But see, I lived through MJ. So like I remember I remember when he scored 55 points against my Knicks. And I
Okay.
just how devastating he could be. A lot of people, the MJ part's kind of theoretical. It seems like past tense, but
Right.
not for me.
Right. Okay. So this is a three-part, but you can choose one. Which one do you like doing the best? Do you like teaching? Do you like sports writing? Or do you like radio?
I think teaching and sports writing are really close.
Okay.
And I think I fluctuate. Right now I like the teaching part. But there are times I think but it could be sports writing. I think it could the needle moves on that one.
Okay, here we go. So, Brooklyn style pizza or New York street meat?
Oh, Brooklyn pizza.
Brooklyn pizza.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Last one. Last one here. This is important, Jane. Popeyes or KFC?
Oh, I don't eat chicken. Sorry.
Oh, Jane.
Sorry,
no chicken? Not baked? Grilled? Nothing?
No,
Are you a vegetarian?
No, not really. I just don't. That's not my thing.
Okay.
I don't like it.
Okay, I got you. Are we talking all meat or are we just talking chicken?
Well, so I have been a vegetarian for stretches. I've eaten fish, just fish for stretches.
Okay, that's good.
But I really like a good hot Italian sausage.
Okay.
So sometimes I'll have
I got you.
if I don't know what to say, you could, don't use that as a soundbite. But like, I just
that's authentic though. We gotta roll with that because that's authentic. I like it,
Well, I'm just saying, so something like say New York City street fair where you can go and you can get that with like the peppers and the onions and stuff. It's hard to say no to that, even as a vegetarian.
Right. I totally get it. Italian sausages are very good. You are the first person though, out of all the episodes I've had, that has said no to either Popeyes or KFC, no chicken at all. There's no chicken. You're the first person, but that's okay.
Sorry.
Right. That means you're authentic and you're different, you're unique, and I love it, and it's awesome.
Yeah, that's right.
You talked about Julie DeCaro and you talked about your podcast, The Ladies Room, if you said that. So how did that podcast get started between you two ladies?
Well, it was part of the reason that I started writing for Deadspin, actually, because I loved doing the trifecta with Kate Fagan and Sarah Spain, who are still two of my very good friends. Mm-hmm. And we did that on ESPN for 2-3 years on Saturdays, 3-hour radio show.
I would listen.
And I kind of, what's that?
I said I would listen.
Oh, thanks. So it's it was different. It wasn't like a debate show necessarily, although we did have a debates but we talked about things that were kind of outside the realm that weren't being discussed on other shows. We talked about women's sports, you know, things that I felt like we could just kind of follow our interests. And that I wanted to be able to do that again, and respect Julie a great deal, and knew that she'd want to kind of hit some of the same topics that I did.
Right.
So we, you know, lucky enough to be able to start this, and I've really enjoyed doing it. We've had some terrific guests, and I feel like, you know, if you put all of our shows together, you really get a good sense of how the industry for women's sports has evolved, how women, you know, who are in the industry feel about certain things. We've discussed, you know, Sedona Prince, and when she did the viral video of from the NCAA tournament of the tiny little pathetic triangle of weights, whereas, you know, on the men's side in their bubble, there was a massive palace. And I just think of like Charlie Collier, who's now playing in the WNBA, but back then was playing for Texas. And a couple days after that video went viral, Charlie Collier Texas won, and she was interviewed by Holly Rowe courtside, and she had her hands on her hip like this. And her biceps were absolutely chiseled. Like she was a Greek statue standing there talking to Holly Rowe. Mm-hmm. And it just showed like, yes, women use weights. They're in the weight room. It has a tangible effect on their bodies and what they're able to do on the court. Right. So yeah, so that's that kind of thing, you know, we're able to talk about stuff like that.
Nah, that's a really good point. I mean, I saw that video and I was like, damn, it can't be that much of a discrepancy from the men's and the women's. I mean, that's just shameful for anybody to do that. It also took me back to the bubble. If you remember when the women moved in their facilities for the WNBA, that was bad. I mean, it was all kind of stuff and leaks on the wall, and just it was just bad. And like I said, you just can't continue this. You can't continue to have examples like that where people are being just so treated unfairly, and then just have to be allowed. I mean, that's just crazy. So
right. And I think, you know, what you're finding now is that fan bases don't want to accept it. Like the NCAA women's fan base is like, thinks it's ridiculous. And even if you're not watching the games, you still have a group of people for whom equity is very important in women's sports. So I do think that the needle has moved a lot, you know.
Oh yeah, it definitely has. It definitely has moved a lot without question, and it needed to. And it starts with just videos like that, posting videos like that, and continuing to post videos when you see discrepancy between things between men.
So hold on just a sec. I think we had you froze on me for like, I'm going to say 20 seconds. So.
I'm sorry. I was agreeing with you. I was saying, yes, we need to have more videos like that to show discrepancies between the men and the women, because without those videos, fan bases wouldn't be able to, relate and also voice their opinion as well, to kind of overturn some of the decisions that are being made by the hierarchies. So you stay with ESPN for almost 10 years. Then obviously in 2017, I believe they have a mass layoff of a lot of people, a lot of different, if I'm not mistaken, 400 plus jobs were gone. Unfortunately, you were one of those. I believe you went to London for a couple of years after that, if I'm not mistaken. Then you come back, and now, all of a sudden, Marist University. You get the call to come there and be a director, and also now you're a columnist for the New York Daily News, a sports columnist there. Can you talk about how those two opportunities presented themselves to you?
Well, I found out about the opening when I was still in London at Marist, and I'd taught. I'd been an adjunct at the Columbia Graduate School of Journalism, which is where I got my master's degree, and I have always loved teaching and working with young people, and so that's been something that I really liked. So when I heard about the job opening at Marist, I kind of inquired about it, not super seriously, but then they reached out and were like, "Hey, are you really interested? Because, we'd love to have you apply." So, so I applied, and And because I also, was kind of thinking, we talk about careers in sports media, and as though it's it's one career, like you are a beat writer for the rest of your life. And I actually think you kind of, for me anyway, it's been helpful to do to do different things. Like,
Yeah.
I started off as a writer, but I did a lot of radio and I did some TV, and the teaching part was an important component for me. So kind of to be able to stretch and to see what might be interesting for me. And this has been incredibly interesting for me. I mean, I'm able to kind of dream up different things that we can do, whether it comes to research or polling through Marist Poll, and go and execute it, make it happen. I love working with the students that we have at Marist. Like this has been a difficult year because we can't be together on campus, and that's been really hard. But boy, in that first year, we had the best time with our students, and we're going to get that back. So yeah, I actually ended up taking the job and starting about 5 months before our family was scheduled to move back from London to New York. So I kind of did a bit of commuting, living up by Marist and then going back and forth a couple times a month to London just to see everybody. And yeah, and then once the school year was over, I moved back to London for like, a month, and we got all of our stuff and packed up everything and moved us all back to New York. So yeah, so it was pretty hectic. And then this is a testament to Eric Barrow, who was the editor at the Daily News at the time. But the day after I agreed to take the job at Marist, he called me and he said, "Hey, we hear you're coming back to the United States, so you want to be a columnist." So yeah, things kind of came together pretty quickly, and it was lucky because that doesn't always happen in our industry right now. So felt pretty good about that, and it's been great. I do a little bit of the writing, keep my hand in it, have the podcast Julie through Deadspin, and it's and then have the position at Marist. It's been fantastic.
No, it's well deserved too. I followed a lot of your columns early on. I thought you do a terrific job of just writing. Period. I think the best way to get better at writing is to pick some columnists that you really admire, that you really love their work, and try to study their work, try to see how they write. For me, I want to be a sports writer, and me covering high school games, me doing feature stories and stuff like that. The main challenge for me has always been how can I write this story to where people can't just go click on their phone and look at stats and pick it up. How can I story tell it in a creative way? And that's been the ultimate challenge for me, especially this year.
That is such a great point. You make such a great point there, and I think part of that is you talk to more people while you're there. And I think this is something where students coming up today are warier of the human interaction because they're kind of raised on more of a digital form of communication. But if you want to stand out as a writer, you got to do the reporting. There's no excuse, there's no substitute for it. So if you can be at it, and I know it's been tough the last year, believe me, so I'm not, but when things get normal again, you go to a game, you talk to 3 people on one side, you talk to 3 people on the other, you get both the coaches from both teams before the game starts. I would always, when I was covering high schools, because that's how I got my start, I'd always go up to both coaches, say, "Hey, I'm Jane McManus. I'm here to cover the game. Who's turned on for you these days? Who's your best defender? Has anything happened with any of the players on your team recently? Any stories I should know about? Anything like this?" So, and I would get, at least that way, I would have, going into the game, I would have an idea, okay, if this person does something, I've got this backstory. If that person, whatever. Keep your ears open, talk to people at the game. Maybe you get a parent who gives you a piece of information. I feel like there is no substitute. You're not going to find it online. A lot of that stuff is not going to be online. You got to go get it yourself. So that is something that is, I think, absolutely 100% true. And that's how you get those anecdotes that are going to set your stuff aside, apart from other people.
Absolutely. And I've been kind of, beating my editor in the head, been saying, listen, I love the gamers that you're giving me. I love the work, but I definitely want to start writing some different stories as well. So I can write a game creatively, I can write a game creatively, but at the same time, you're going to have to throw some stats up in there, some point, and they can go kind of find those stats on different sites. Now, high school may be a little more difficult. You might have to dig a little bit more for the stats because we take our own stats in high school games.
Yes,
But
that's right.
but at the same time, when you talk about college and professional, those stats are already out and about. So you have to tell it in a way that's creative to where they can visualize it. But when reading your story from not being there at the game, and that's like I said, been the ultimate challenge for me, which I accept because I love sports writing. And I love it with a passion, so I love to do that. And I believe you're one of the best in the game to do it. There's definitely some others, but they cannot talk about sports writing and not mention you, and that's the main thing. So, and that's just my opinion. Um, I'll get you out of here on this question, and this is that. Um, what is something that you would tell somebody in this industry that they should either look out for, be aware of, that isn't an obvious thing for someone to see?
I mean, I guess, I would say we're all independent contractors right now in some ways,
Mm-hmm.
whether you work for an organization or not. It used to be that you'd work for the Times and they would kind of, or whatever organization, and they would kind of have a code of ethics or standards or whatever, and you would have to live up to them. That's got to be your own now. And so I know, we're all kind of hustling to get information and everything, but I would also just say that before you start off, kind of working for yourself, you are accountable 100% for everything that you write, whether it's right or it's wrong or anything else.
Right.
All the tweets that are sent, any one of those could end up, a really a wrong or a tweet that you send where you didn't do your homework, where you're just making assumptions and you're throwing something out there. It could be your last, it could be your last in the business. It is that, you're on a high wire in certain ways now that you just weren't, kind of when I started out. And so I would say kind of, deep breaths before hitting send on a tweet. And I would, or whatever social media is the next thing. And I would also say, have in the back of your mind before you get started, in your working career, who you are, what you will accept and what you won't accept. And
I like that.
I mean, that's just in terms of treatment from others, whatever, but also in terms of your own standards for what you will put in a story. Make, anonymous quotes, anonymous sourcing. If you want to have if you're working for yourself, no one's going to tell you to have 3 sources before you write it. If you have it on background, you need to know that for yourself. So have in the back of your mind, what your own standards for your writing and your content production are, so that way you will never feel like, oh, I just slapped something out there because I was on deadline or whatever. You have to know in the back of your head what your standards are, because at the end of the day, you are accountable to yourself, and no one else is going to have your back should something go wrong. So you need to make sure that you have really nailed stuff down before your credibility is you have it when you start, but you can lose it really easily. And so it's an expensive thing to have and to keep, and just keep that in mind.
Yeah, a lot of journalists love to be first, but not necessarily accurate. And that's the main thing, as like you said, as a journalist, is credibility and accuracy. You want it to be well written, of course, but you definitely want it to be credible, and you definitely want to be accurate, because once you're wrong, your credibility is shot. No one's going to want to deal with you, and sources is everything to us. That's how we get all of our 411, all of our information. Without the sources, we don't have stories to make. So definitely true, without
That's
question.
right. Yeah.
Where can they listen to the Ladies Room podcast?
Apple Podcasts, Spotify, I believe it's linked to off of NPR, One Player, which is, I love that connection. Because even though it's a sports podcast, it's about more than sports. And, I think sports in general is about more than sports, but yes, that's where you can listen to it. Please give us a listen, and rate us if you like us. Well, I mean, you can rate us if you don't like us. We have a number of trolls who have kind of tried to find our podcast and rate us and say things like, terrible things about us.
Right.
So, you know,
Which you're gonna have.
I don't know, maybe they've listened to the podcast. I'm guessing they haven't like given it a real listen, but
right.
So be it.
Hey.
So you deal with that. I think, you know, women in media, we expect to deal with some of that. So we love it when people come and listen to us and rate us with an open mind.
Just like the Clint Eastwood movie, you're gonna get the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's no
Exactly.
question, no question about it. Whatever you do, whoever you are in the industry, you always gonna have some kind of pushback. But like you said, the trolls, you thank them, you appreciate them because hey, it's feedback. But it is what it is. They commenting. They could be doing something else. They still commenting on your stuff. Where can they find you on your social media? What's your social media handle?
I'm Twitter at Jane Sports, JANESPORTS. Been there since I just got a little notice. I've been on Twitter 13 years, which I think, you know, longer than anybody needs to be on Twitter.
Hey, that's okay. As long as you, that's all right. 13 years, that's longevity right there. So that's good. That means you've been tweeting, you've been doing
long time plugging away at my Twitter. But yes, you can read me there. I have an Instagram. It's the same, but it's private. I kind of, and then I killed my Facebook account. Only so much social media, you know, only so much social media in my life.
Well, McManus, you're only one woman. You only can keep up with so much. I mean, man, that's a lot. It's a lot to keep up with, but that's totally awesome. Definitely go check out the Ladies Room with Julie DeCaro, Jane McManus, Apple, Spotify, other platforms. Y'all can check it out. Please follow her back at Jane Sport on Twitter. She's great. She's awesome. And of course, Jane, you know I will be in touch with you. I'm actually starting to cover a new league, which is a college summer league.
Cool.
So yes, I'm gonna be doing some games, but also some feature stories and some different kind of stories as well. So you know, as I've always done, I'm gonna send some articles your way for sure.
Yes. Good luck. I'm glad. That sounds like an exciting thing to be doing, kind of a new venture. So kind of new storytelling to do. That's really cool.
New. Yeah, so this is a step up in the high school. You know, I've done high school stuff, and that's great. And I've done that on basketball, football, baseball, and lacrosse level, all prep sports. But now we're doing college. So this is a little bit different, which is great. Talking to actual players and getting more access to stuff. So it'll be cool. But
there's you know, working your way up is there's no substitute for it.
Yeah.
Learning as you go, figuring out how to do things. I mean, it's, you know, it's harder to do it now because people come out and they'll get jobs, you know, cutting replays for a broadcaster or something like that. Being able to kind of go up the old fashioned way, like that's rarer. I'm actually, I mean, I find it pretty impressive, Chris, that that's what you're doing, because I think it's going to make you stronger in the long run.
Absolutely. No, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm doing this because this is it for me as far as undergrad. I graduate July 31st, so I'm doing this as far as part of my capstone. So this is something that I really want to do. I really want to hit a home run with this, with the games that I do cover, and also trying to, just like you said, talk to different people there. You know, parents, coaches. It could be scouts there because we're talking about JUCO players and also talking about university players that want to go into the MLB draft. So I'm definitely going to keep my ear to the ground and be able to talk to many different people for sure. I also got, when you said that we got cut off a little bit, I also talked about you and Fagan versus Spain, because you guys are Knicks fans. You know, anybody that knows Spain, she's a Bulls fan because she's from Illinois. She's a diehard, and she's also going to be on this podcast very soon.
That's awesome. Yeah. She's fantastic. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's great. Well, you're getting some good guests, Chris. I mean, you know, little resume builder.
This is for sure. It is always a pleasure, James, to talk to you. I always end my podcast like this. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we conclude?
No, just, hey, keep doing what you're doing, and good luck.
I appreciate that, McManus. You take care. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. Thank you for being a part of the Work Hard, Play Harder podcast, Conversations with CD. You take care.